resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Hello, my next level friends. Sergio Gomez here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Artist Next Level podcast. This is episode number 101, and I'm so excited to be with you today. If you by any chance missed episode 100, you definitely want to check that out. In that episode, Dr. Elias Gomez and I do a countdown of the top 5 most downloaded episodes up to now. Well, today I have a great interview to share with you. It's an interview that I did in person with none other than Elias Martin. Elias is the director of Floating World Gallery. As a dealer, curator to private clients, collector, and educator with 16 years of professional experience, Elias has helped build important private collections and has placed works at notable public institutions. He is passionate about educating both his clients and the public on the fine art of woodblock prints in the Ukiyo-e, Shin Hanga, and Sosaku Hanga traditions, as well as on contemporary Japanese sculpture and painting. He has a special place in his heart for Sosaku Hanga and has personally amazed one of the world's most foremost collections. And I am super excited to share with you my interview with Elias Martin. Hi Elias, how are you doing today?
Well, hi Sergio, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, I am really excited to be sitting actually right in front of you, not over the phone like usually most of my podcasts. It's really exciting to be spending today here a few hours with you at Floating World Gallery. We're here in Chicago where you are curator and also director.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, on the way here, how we met. And I was telling a friend who came with me on how we met. And I think we first met online through Facebook. I started following you and, what you do as a curator and also going through the different art fairs and traveling around the world. And it was just quite fascinating. And then I started to look for you as I also went to visit fairs and things like that. And we became more acquainted.
Yeah.
And I found, you're just an amazing person and somebody who was so easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
And so today you gave us an amazing tour here of Floating World Gallery. So as we go through the interview, I want to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
How you have this passion that I can tell. Just talking to you from the first time.
Yes.
About what you do. You are not only a curator, but you are also a collector.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
we're going to talk a little bit about that. So why don't we, as we go into your story, let's go right in and maybe let's go back to your childhood. From what I understand, you were born here in Chicago.
Yes, I was born here. Absolutely.
So tell us, how did you grow up led you into art? That's always fascinating for me.
I think that's a really great question because I ask a lot of my clients that very same question. How are you interested in art and how'd you come to my door? And because I'm always really fascinated by that. Being a collector, one is always curious about how the other person got the bug.
Right.
But as for me, well, I was born here, born and raised in Chicago. Both my parents are from Mexico. And though my mom and my dad don't collect, my mom had an interest in Japanese sort of ceramics.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And so she used to buy some Japanese porcelain pieces here in Chicago at a store right by the Century Mall. The store's not there anymore. But I remember as a kid, I used to go there with her.
Okay.
And I would look around and all these things from Japan. And for some reason, Japanese culture, Japanese history was always fascinating to me. And as far as I can remember, probably because of my early visits with my mom at this store. But who knows? I always tell people when they ask, why Japanese art? And I always tell them, because I was Japanese in my past life. And so that's kind of one reason, I would imagine. But the real collecting didn't really begin until I was in college.
Okay.
I was at DePaul. I was not studying art.
Okay.
I was studying philosophy and Eastern religious traditions, but I had a Japanese art class with Liz Leahoy. And, when we were in class, someone actually brought a Japanese print to class, and the print was being passed around in class, and something sort of clicked in my head. And basically, from that day on, I just became a fanatic.
Wow.
And I really got interested in the genre, and it sort of coincided with interests I had with modern 20th century Western arts, and actually some of the same artistic movements that are in Japanese art that I collect were in Western art that I admired, and so I just sort of gravitated to the Japanese side of it.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. So, and this is probably before the internet was what it was now, where you could just Google and
Absolutely.
go to eBay, and it was a whole different world, you know.
It was at the very, it was the infamous, it was the very, very beginning.
We're not that old, but
No.
but these things change so quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, digitally, I think we're like, I would speak for myself. In dog years, I'm kind of old, because from one year to another, technology just changes quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, back at that time, information was much harder to come by, and so it required a lot of legwork. I actually had to go to galleries. I had to go to the Art Institute. I had to go to libraries. I travel. There were galleries in New York. There was a couple places in Chicago, but basically, I also relied on a print show that traveled to Chicago, and there's a couple print shows in the U.S. where sort of the only way to learn was either to buy or talk to dealers that were selling the material. Wow. And of course, the dealers would give you more information if you bought more things. So so I did that.
So at what point, you went from being the collector to now actually getting into the business of art?
Well, that's also a good question. The collector part never left. That's always sort of been there with me.
And you're still collecting.
Absolutely. I'm still very much collecting. The good news is I collect such an obscure sort of niche genre of things that there really isn't a competition with my collector friends as well as clients. But professionally, I started working in the field in 2000, right out of college.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and actually when I was in college, I was being groomed to become an academic, to do something very, very different. And I decided, well, I'll just work for Floating World for about a year, learn a little bit more about what I'm interested in, and then I'll move on. And I just got sucked in.
The rest is history, like
Absolutely.
they say. So tell us, you mentioned Floating World Gallery. Tell us a little bit about that. What's the focus of the gallery? How long has it been in business?
Well, Floating World Gallery has been around for, in few incarnations for nearly 35 years. And the owners, Bill and Roberta Stein, started it because they were collectors. And then they started finding all this material and thought, well, why not make it into a business? And so by the time I came along in 2000, they had already been in business for about 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And the gallery is primarily focused on Japanese works of art on paper. At least that's how it was founded. And then, of course, my interests are in also contemporary Japanese art, sculpture, and post-war abstract painting. So I kind of sort of brought that along, and the business expanded in that way.
Right. So it's kind of a really interesting story because you have this passion and you end up in a gallery that also reflects your interest. You can end up in another gallery. It still is art, but the particular interest that you have is where you are. And I think that's what the passion that you bring to the table that I saw from the first time I met you. And I'm sure the collectors that buy from Floating World Gallery, they can see that in you. There's a personal passion for it.
Yeah. Well, that makes my job easier, I suspect.
And probably more enjoyable, too.
Certainly more enjoyable. Absolutely. And I suppose the secret's out. I'd probably do this for free. But don't tell anyone. But the point, though, is that art really is about relationships, and it's just, you know, you're more willing to buy something if you learn about it, and if you learn about it from someone who's really passionate about it, then that passion is actually contagious. And so I'm here because that enthusiasm from someone else was rubbed off and moved on to me. So it's sort of, we're keepers of a flame that we pass on to collector.
Right. How much of that flame do you think also should come from the artist himself or herself? You know, being passionate about what we do.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I'm talking about, as a dealer, the art that we offer and then educating our clients. A lot of the art that we do sell is actually secondary market art by artists who've passed away. And it's actually one of our responsibilities as dealers to be able to keep that passion that the artist had at one point alive. That's their legacy. Their artwork is their legacy. And so we have an obligation to pass that along to the clients, collectors, museums. And of course, for some of the contemporary artists that we represent, that's easy. We spend some time with those artists, and they pass along that flame. And so we really try to be try to do a hard sort of job so that their artistic inspiration and their techniques and all of the things that, you know, that makes their art unique is passed along, and so that the collector understands.
Right. Now, so as we, you know, started talking about the market and these things, collectors and galleries, how much has the art world, in your view, has changed from when you started, you know, when you got into it the first time you started working in the gallery to like today, you know? Now there's a lot of art fairs that people go to. It's kind of like a big circus. Just about every weekend there's an art fair somewhere in the world just about.
Absolutely.
You know, how has that transition been for you? Has it made things easier? Has it made things harder?
What's going on right now is it is fascinating, and 100 years from now, I think sociologists are going to be studying this time, especially in the art market, because it's really wild. But it has changed. It's also an excellent question. When I first started, I felt it was more connoisseur based. There was a lot of people who were true collectors. When I say true, I mean they knew exactly what they were buying. They were just looking for the right material to add to their collection, and they were already well educated. And what you needed was the material, and they would buy. Of course, part of our job was to make converts and you know, train and sharpen other people's eye, but we were training them to be connoisseurs. And now the art market is so vast and large, and there are so many reasons why people buy art. They're not buying it exclusively because they love it or because they need something to put up on their wall. The world of finance and speculation and investment and all of those other realms of you know, finance has sort of creeped into the art world. So we're still dealing with collectors, but in some ways they're collecting for different reasons. And now that there's so much more money that's involved in the field, those reasons have transformed. In some ways it makes it easier to sell something, and sometimes it makes it harder to sell something. But at the end of the day, it's changed. Certainly it has. Yeah.
And do you think a lot of the change comes from those people who have that influence, you know, in the buying power?
Yeah, you know, actually the main place where I think it's coming from, and it's coming from people or organizations or people that have a lot of money to throw at arts. And now that art has become more of a commodity than it is something else. I mean, certainly it was always a commodity to the extent that, you know, you could buy and sell it, but 20 years ago, people were buying, the people that I came across were buying art because they would look wonderful in their home, or they had to have this piece because they couldn't live without it, or it fit within their collection. And now I'm dealing with a lot of art advisors who come into the booth before to discuss the piece. And then, yes, there are times where I don't even meet the person who's buying the art. Or if they do come into the booth and I talk to them, it's a quick conversation and they just glance at the work and either they agree to buy it or they don't. But it's usually the art advisor that's making the decision.
That's pretty interesting. And actually, I've been following your work at the booths, and I have to say it's always one of my favorites. Not because you're a friend of mine, but I love visiting your booth. Even when I went with my wife, she's like, "Oh, we have to go find Elias and see what they have." And you have always outstanding work. I'm always fascinated by the choices of sculpture work that you bring in from contemporary Japanese artists. Amazing work. I mean, just incredible, the craftsmanship, and the way you're a seasoned curator and working with the space. You understand space and how people approach it and see it. That is very fascinating. Can you describe a little bit for our audience, like, if they were to walk in a typical booth of yours, what would they see?
Well, good question. I would say they would see a little bit of everything. We deal in contemporary Japanese art, and that encompasses all kinds of material. In terms of sculpture, we have artists working in glass. We have artists working in metal, in ceramic, clay. We have artists working in lacquer. But these are all contemporary sculptures that take on materials that were traditional and techniques that are traditional that have been passed down hundreds if not thousands of years, but they turn tradition on its head because it's not just the material, it's not the technique, it's also the vision, what they're making. And what they're making is something completely new, taking those materials and that skill.
Can you give some of the names of the artists?
Yeah, sure. Well, one artist who needs no introduction is Fukami, Suharu Fukami. And Fukami's work is in every major museum across the United States. There's a very beautiful ceramic sculpture of his at the Met right now, a permanent display. His work is at the Art Institute, at LACMA, British Museum, but he basically takes porcelain and there's a slip cast that he creates and creates a really wonderful, graceful form, and adds a celadon glaze, his own sort of interpretation of this very important, time-honored traditional glaze. And he makes these beautiful, graceful works that they don't look like they were made by human hands. And they're very contemporary looking. Yeah, he's kind of inspired by, some of them kind of remind people of Japanese swords, but they also kind of organic too. They read off, like some of them look like whale tails or all kinds of different things.
Right. Yeah. And how about the paintings, which you also show two-dimensional work?
Oh yeah, in terms of paintings, we focus on post-war abstract painting. So Gutai artists are our favorite. So we've had works by Shiraga, Masanobu. Those are two important Gutai artists. But we also have work by Kumi Sugai, Domoto, just to name a few. But another one is Tanaka. But we focus on abstract painting by particular sort of circle of artists that right now they're all the rage, and really push the boundaries of what how painting was understood in Japan after the war.
Great. And what's the price range that typically is found in your booths?
Well, the sculptures that are done by newer artists start about 10,000, 15,000. Of course, Fukami's large-scale sculptures sell for about $250,000, if not more. Depends on the size. And the paintings are more than that. They're under $1 million. We try to, the sweet spot for us is paintings that are under $1 million, so that they're still attainable in the eyes of a lot of collectors. And so also we offer the ability for some collectors to buy these paintings, and in a few years, as the market has shown it's really hot, they can turn around and sell them if they want.
Right.
So our sweet spot is to find them for a reasonable price, sell them for well, to some of your listeners, they're probably thinking under $1 million or $1 million, that's a lot of money. It is. But in terms of post-war abstract painting, it's actually quite reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I've always thought about this too, how much pressure does it put on you as you do the selection and you prepare for a fair to have the right pieces, have the right work?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's heavy, especially those price ranges. And of course, for any given gallery going to an art fair, it's a big expense, and you have to do it quite often too. How is it for you to, that process of selection, and how much does 1 year repeat in aesthetically what people are buying from another year? And in other words, is there a certain taste that you start to gather from, let's say, Miami versus somewhere else?
Well, that's a fascinating question, and it does.
Especially because you continue to return.
Absolutely,
so, yeah.
Absolutely. There are different. Well, to sort of unpack that one, I would say, first of all, there are different tastes in different parts of the world. So European taste tends to be more. They're more conservative and more oriented towards the craftsmanship of things, particularly the sculpture. They're more interested in the process, whereas people in the U.S. Who tend to be younger are more interested in the effect, the final product, the sculpture itself. What does it look like? The thing itself, and they're not as interested in the actual process of how it's made. Though luckily, all our artists have both skill sets. They can, there's an amazing amount of skill involved, but also they're visionaries and they're able to push the boundaries of the material. But in terms of the paintings, one of the difficulties in what we do is trying to locate material. To find post-war abstract painting, we need to go out into the secondary market, go to auctions, talk to collectors, and negotiate purchases. So these things we're constantly doing all the time. And though we're working with the sculptors to build and to make work for particular fairs, we kind of give them carte blanche on what they want to do. Because we sort of already understand that they're able to do this, and they're selling well. It's the paintings that we go out and we just try to find. So I'm not really catering to a certain taste. I'm just looking for certain artists and in a certain period of time. And right now, mid 50s through the late 60s is a really great time for Japanese post-war abstract painters, and those are the paintings that we sell, and we have really good luck with right now. Yeah,
and you guys usually have strong sales from what I've seen.
So far, so good. I'm knocking on wood.
This is good.
Yeah, well, maybe not wood laminate or something.
That is wonderful. But and of course, as you go to the fairs and you're part of that, and you talk to a lot of other galleries as well, people just like you who are doing the same thing. How much of this art fair world, has had an impact on galleries? Do you think it's also becoming kind of like the main feeder for most galleries nowadays?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I should have also said, to answer your question earlier, it's a circus. These art fairs are just it's a show, it's entertainment, and it's big business. It's all kinds of things, and it's an experience, and the experience is being built. It's being catered to the art buyer. Right. But for the gallerist, it's kind of a scary world, because now you're primarily focused on finding material for fairs. And for some gallerists, I think they're having the problem of not just finding the material, but they're getting their artists to work really hard for particular fairs. And so you're always moving towards the next fair. And there's less and less focus on shows at the gallery, solo shows on certain artists, and cultivating the work of artists in that way. I feel like there's a little bit more of an organic quality when you do it this way. But when you're so focused on the art shows, you're kind of focused on the end results, to sell at these fairs. And for some gallerists, I think that's a problem. That's a problem. Now, if these art shows weren't happening and we were just showing this artwork at our gallery, I think I'd be doing the exact same thing. In fact, we were doing the exact same thing before we were doing these shows. But nonetheless, I could see that as a problem that is ongoing for most gallerists that are showing it at these big shows.
Yeah, because the stretch of time you're working, you have the pressure of those 5 days that's your window of opportunity to sell the work that you brought. Then you have to start preparing for the next one that's coming down the line.
Yes.
And so it's a year-round thing for many galleries, going back and forth. Back and forth. So the question is, how long will that sustain? And
that is I don't know. These are questions I've thought about myself. And I don't know if it is sustainable to the extent that, well, how about this? It is sustainable. I imagine these shows can go on and on and on. But is it sustainable in a way that important art by artists at the highest quality is still offered on a sort of on a continuous basis? I mean, I don't know if artists can work so rapidly to fill the need for every art fair that's coming up. That's a huge burden on the artists. It's a huge burden on the gallerists. But when there's money involved, I suppose they'll do whatever necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting too. I mean, I remember in talking to so many artists that when we were in school, kind of like you get indoctrinated that it's all about the gallery. Be represented by the gallery was like the thing. Now it's more of being in the art fair, the new thing, right?
Absolutely.
The new goal almost that artists are looking for. And so that also creates this pressure on the artists of, how am I going to get in the fair, and
absolutely.
who's going to show me with it now. And at the same time, there's all this range of fairs, from Basel to all the others to the beginning of the line, where sometimes artists have to pay a lot of money to be on a fair where they have no idea whether it's going to be successful for them or not. And so it's kind of a new goal that artists are almost setting for themselves. And I find, because we talk to many artists and we help them, that when they see themselves getting to a certain age and they haven't got to a fair where they start to feel like, how come I haven't got to that point? So it is quite interesting, how the art world and all these changes and at the same time, you have this, which is the business, and then you have also many artists who are doing really good on their own without the gallery and without the fair too.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting age.
Yeah,
it's an age of contradictions. Because,
exactly.
With the internet, you could be an artist on your own and be very successful.
Exactly.
And there are artists that have been able to achieve quite a bit of success without serious gallery representation. And of course, there are the big name artists that have skipped gallery representation and now selling at the major auctions.
Exactly.
So there's that. But if you're an artist, you're the sort of general artist painting or sculpting, it's still, the paradigm of finding the right gallerist to represent your work is still important.
Right.
But now you have attached to that the concern of, well, what show is that gallerist associated with? Because that's true. It's true. If you're an artist, certainly you want to sell your artwork. And the way that most artwork now is sold is at shows.
Right.
And we are cultivating collectors unfortunately, I think the environment is cultivating collectors to get into this sort of buying frenzy.
The rhythm of it.
Yes. And by the rhythm of the show. So, during Art Basel, all of the collectors are saving up their pennies to go to Art Basel.
Big pennies.
Yes, big pennies. And they're going to go down there, of course, for the spectacle and the experience of it and the parties and all of the things that you've read about Art Basel, because that's certainly true. But for a buyer, it's also in the buyer's perspective, it's a good opportunity to go to a show and you get to see hundreds, if not thousands, of works of art. A lot of them for the same price point of what the money that you want to spend, and you could kind of see what's out there and make an informed choice that you couldn't have done, 30 years ago. I mean, there were shows then, but they weren't so focused on the collector. And even with the internet, you could see hundreds of pieces of art in one day on your computer. But certainly, if you're at an art fair, you could see and engage with artwork for 8 hours, and then pick one piece of 100 that you thought was great. And so from the side of the artist, you want to make sure that you're in the right sort of with the right gallerist who's showing at the right fair that will attract the collectors that are able to spend the kind of money that you would like your work to sell for.
Right, exactly. What can artists do to be more accessible to galleries, in your opinion?
Well,
or what kind, or maybe I should rephrase to, in what kind of qualities do you find besides the work? What kind of other qualities do you find important in an artist to have?
What I would focus. I mean, first of all, if I were an artist, and I really wish I were, but I'm not. Though, is to put as much passion into your work as possible, and then find a gallerist that can be passionate about your work as much as you're about your own work. So they're an extension of you. Right. And also understand how much room you can grow under their umbrella. And if there's plenty of room, that's great, because that gives you the ability to grow as an artist, to grow financially, to grow in so many ways. But if you just pick someone because they're there, and you don't have gallery representation, why not have someone? It's like a bad relationship. Yeah. Picking a person just because you're lonely, I suppose. You don't want that. You better be by yourself than with the wrong person. Right. And so you want to pick a gallery like a person. It is a relationship, and it's a give and take. And you're in a bad relationship when it's really one-sided. Yeah. And it's all about the gallerist, that they need this, they need that. So it should be a two-way street, of course. But as an artist, because of the current market, it is important to be at the bigger shows, because art does sell very well there, and you're doing this because you want your art out in private hands, and perhaps even in institutions. And I know personally, that institutions are not going to all of the art fairs. The curators only have so much time. They have budget, so they can't spend an entire week during Art Basel, and you would need the entire week to see every show. Right. So they're only going to hit a few, 2 or 3. So you want to, as an artist, you want to know what shows those are. Go to those shows, meet the gallerists that are represented in those shows, and see if your art is a great fit for that gallery. Right.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a great insight there that you can give to artists. Now, as we start to wrapping it up for this episode, I have a question that's more on a personal level. What's been, throughout these years in your career, one of the most gratifying experiences that you had?
Well, that's a great question. I would say it's not selling. And though I'm very fortunate to make a good living doing this, I host seminars and salons and talks on modern Japanese art. And the most gratifying moments are when I'm able to introduce something that's, I think, quite special to someone who actually finds it very special too. That they've actually never heard of what they're seeing, and never would have really run across it, but then they give you that look. And it's probably the same look I gave in that class at DePaul when I first looked at that print that made everything connect for me. And so being able to pass on that fire, I would say, is the most gratifying. There's a bit of a frustrated academic in me. and so in those moments of that really profound connection from one individual to the next, that's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing. That's my raison d'etre.
That's very cool. That's very cool. And I think that's kind of what makes you special too, is that willingness to educate the public and not only the collector but also the general public, who wants to know more about what you are passionate about. And who knows, maybe another person will also get excited for that, and that flame, like you said, continues to pass on and on, especially of a tradition that is from the past.
Absolutely.
And trying to keep it alive for the future generations, And I think that is pretty cool.
Oh, thank you.
That is very awesome. So, Elias, as we wrap it up for today, do you have a piece of advice? I know you have given quite a bit, but one last thing that you could say to an artist who is maybe starting their career right now?
Yeah. Well, what I would say, I find this as a common element in all of the artists that I think are successful. And I define success in a lot of ways, but certainly that are selling art is this. You have to find your passion, you find your voice. Once you have that, don't be discouraged at all. And it's just a matter of time of finding the right gallerist to represent your work, and they have to connect with you. Your work has to resonate with them, and if they don't understand what you're saying or what you'd like to say, it's not because you're not saying it. You just need to find the right person. You can't be at every transaction when your art is selling, so you want the right person to speak for you. And that person needs to understand your individual voice, and perhaps they believe in the same thing, or if not, they're able to learn it from you. But one way or the other, don't lose your own special sort of outlook on life. Just because it's not understood at the beginning, I'm certain you'll find that right person.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Cool. That's very awesome.
Yeah.
And I always think that, there's not everybody's going to like your work. No matter what is it that you do, not everybody's going to like it.
Absolutely.
You just got to find enough of them who will like it.
Yes.
Who will connect to it. Maybe not necessarily like it.
And there's a certain extent that I as a dealer, or as a collector as well, I think the best kind of work doesn't command everyone's appreciation.
Right.
You want people who burn really passionate, a really strong connection to your work, but that maybe is 10% of the population. Who knows? Maybe it's 2%. But the point is, you get people who really get it. You don't want the entire world to get it. I mean, what does that mean? It just means that it's commercially viable. Right. But so is bubblegum. I mean, if you have something really important to say, not everyone's going to be able to hear it.
Exactly. That's cool. That's awesome. So, Elias, where can we find more information about Floating World Gallery? If also some of our friends might be interested on more of the work that the gallery does, where can we find you online?
Well, we have a website. It's floatingworld.com, and those are our Japanese prints and paintings. Okay. And if your listeners are at Art Miami or at TAFOF, we'll be in New York in May for TAFOF. I show with a colleague, a friend of mine, Wahe, who owns a gallery called Yufuku Gallery. We team up, and so you could usually find me in his booth or somewhere in the world selling art.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, it is with this, I want to close the program. It's been really awesome working with you on this, and having this nice conversation face to face versus on the phone. I wish every gallerist, had the passion that you have, and every creator had that passion that you have for what you do, and for taking time to educating the public, and also the artists, who sometimes this art world could be a big mystery. And, you have given your time to give your insight, your experience, and we appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
So with this, I want to thank this episode, and I want to thank everyone for listening. Hope you enjoy it. Please share it with your friends, and I will see you at the next level.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.